You're listening to New Churches Podcast, a production of Send Network on newchurches.com. We discuss all things church planting. If you're looking to take your next step toward multiplication, you're in the right place. Newchurches.com provides relevant and reliable resources for church planters, church multipliers, and disciple makers. Our growing library features pastors, planters, and church leaders like Ed Stetzer, David Platt, Trillia Newbell, Christine Hoover, Dahadi Lewis, Trevin Wax, and many others.
Welcome to another episode of the New Churches Podcast. I'm Tony Marita, Vice President of Planter Development for Send Network, and my guest today is my good friend, Adam Muhtaseb. Adam grew up in a Muslim family, but converted to Christianity as a teenager. Since believing in the gospel, he has had a consistent vision for church planting. Adam planted Redemption City Church in the city of Baltimore. He and his wife, Sherry, have 3 sons. Adam, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Assalamu alaikum.
It's good to see you, my brother.
It's good to see you, bro.
So Adam spent time at our church. We had the privilege of sending him out, and it seems that every time I talk about church planting, at some point I talk about Adam. And so it's his story is amazing. The time we had together at Imago Day was amazing. And I'm like just a proud big brother watching what's happening in Baltimore. He's got a new space that's just beautiful. Brought on some new people. They're planting churches. It's just a great season, isn't it?
It's a great season. I'm a thankful little brother for your investment in me, sending us out to plant in Baltimore, and grateful for you, man.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk today about discipleship. I'd love to talk more about the Baltimore Orioles, as it looks like they're going to have a great team this next year.
Yes.
But maybe we'll get into that later. Adam has taken me to a Orioles game before in what was one of the hottest days of the year also.
Their loss in the playoffs last year was part of my discipleship pathway. It certainly, God used that to disciple me.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about discipleship pathway. So let's just begin with some definition. How would you define discipleship, and why is it a crucial aspect of the Christian life and ministry?
I would use Willard's definition. Discipleship is becoming who Jesus would be if he were you. Like if Jesus had your family, your giftings, lived where you lived, was in your stage of life, what would he be doing? What would he look like? What would his habits be? What would it feel like to be around him? That's discipleship, the process of becoming, having the aura of Christ around you.
Yeah, that's a good vision. I think about Dever's book, Discipling. He defines disciple making as simply helping people follow Jesus, helping others follow Jesus. I think the listeners surely have a sense of why discipleship is important, that this is really at the heart of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is to help others follow Jesus. And as we think about the Great Commission, we know that Jesus' last command to make disciples really should occupy first place in our minds and hearts as we move about among the nations, trying to do just that and fulfill this Great Commission.
And isn't it, this is the end goal of creation, is that God's people will become like Christ. Romans 8, we were predestined and into adoption, right? And he says in verse 28, I believe it is, that he predestined us to be conformed into the image of his Son. So the end goal of all of us is really discipleship, becoming like Jesus. That will happen. What I think 2 Corinthians, like transform from one aspect of glory to the other. And so, yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, even hinted at in the Psalms, Psalm 17, verse 15. As for me, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I awake, I shall be satisfied with your likeness. It's an amazing thought before you die, or to encourage people who are nearing death, that when I awake, I shall be satisfied with your likeness. So it's a marvelous vision, isn't it?
And the good news is that it's fixed. Like, it's going to happen. Jesus is going to make you like himself. What a good gift to us.
Yeah. Now, one of the things about discipleship that you've got the principles of, we want to make disciples. There's certain things that we want to do. Like, we need to expose them to the Bible. We need to teach. We need to, they need to see example They need accountability. They need some structure. They need time. They need care. They need the local church, brothers and sisters around them to spur them on to love and good deeds, so that they don't drift away. But there's also a certain sense of flexibility, I think, that's required in disciple making, that it's not a one size fits all approach, right? So you've got somebody converted out of one background, another person converted out of another background. One person does this for a living, another person does that for a living. Just the nature of people, it's hard to like structure sometimes all disciple making activities. And that's true in the church plan, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You got all kinds of different people, different ethnicities, different stages of spiritual maturity. Yeah. All over the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think even discipling new converts versus discipling people that have been Christians for a while is different. And I think sometimes people make the wrong move of like inserting a new Christian immediately into, say, some Bible study that's over their head, right? They don't accommodate to where they're at. And I think good disciple makers are able to meet people where they're at and shepherd them along. And so I found really healthy churches have good places to put new converts, not just Christians, but like new believers. And one of the things that new believers usually have is also a lot of contact with lost people, having come out of that. And so some of their challenges are a lot different, and they haven't learned how to navigate, the believer and unbeliever world yet. And so I'm sure you've encountered some of that in Baltimore.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think it's super helpful to have it on paper. Here's our plan to develop an unbeliever into a Christian, into a member of the church, disciple, into a missionary. And Rick Warren in his purpose-driven church, he had those concentric circles. You have like the community, then you have the crowd on Sundays, then you have the congregation, then you have the core. He was constantly thinking, how do I assimilate deeper into the core of the church? Right. And I do think, I don't think everyone has to use those exact wordings or models, but if you can think through your mind, if I had a lost person in front of me, Pagan Pete, how am I going to get Pagan Pete and develop him into Planter Pete? Tell me step by step, what if he said yes to everything, what you would do. And actually writing that down, like, okay, first thing we do is invite him to a gospel community or a Sunday gathering. Then he needs to get baptized. So we'd teach him on baptism. And we have RCC 101 for membership. Then we have, foundations for new believers. So we have a step-by-step process at our church that has been huge to get people processed through. And as they progress step by step, they've developed deeper and deeper into disciples of Christ. And many of whom have actually been sent out on mission at the end of that process. So if you aim for nothing, you hit it every time. So we've tried to make a target of step by step. Here's what we want people to do along the pathway.
That's right, man. I think if church planters are listening to this, or I should say aspiring church planters, it's like figure out some kind of plan for discipleship, some kind of pathway. And a lot has been written. A lot of guys have done different things. You don't have to totally reinvent the wheel. You do need to pay attention to your context. But I think sometimes you get out there and boom, you've got some new Christians, but you don't have a plan. And what you have is Sunday morning worship service or a Bible study in a home, and you're kind of underprepared for the various questions that he's going to have or she's going to have. One thing I would say is, it's probably obvious, but the lead pastor cannot do all of this. Like this takes the congregation, this takes the community of faith, because my experience, at least like new believers, is one of the things that they need is not program and structure as much as they need a relationship with a Christian, a mature Christian. I remember, I'm a good case study. I'm sure you could testify to some of this too, coming to faith later in life. But I started following Jesus in college, and the guy who led me to faith, Stephen, I played baseball with. I just exhausted him. I remember distinctly going one day to his apartment, and he said, you can't come in. Like I had so many questions, and he was leading Bible study, and we were
Wasn't he like
weightlifting
sharing
partners.
the gospel? Wasn't he sharing the gospel with you like at second base or
Oh
like
gosh, he was relentless, and
yeah.
very winsome, very warm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but that's what I needed because I didn't know where to start. I mispronounced names in the Bible and asked dumb questions, and so I think it's sort of a comprehensive vision that we need for discipleship. Like it does, you do need some structure, you do need programs, but you also need time and relationship. And you, as the leader, can't always give that particular relational component.
Totally. It's a culture as much as it is a system. Like you
Right.
need step-by-step systems, and it's not something you can just deploy to the discipleship pastor. All right, you're over the discipleship pathway, you take care of it. It's
Right.
something that like happens over a dinner table, or like what
Yeah.
happened with you on second base when you're
Yeah.
catching ground balls and the shortstop sharing the gospel with you, or the weight room. Like that's as much discipleship as a class.
Yeah.
And I would argue in our American culture, we overemphasize the classes and the books and not
Mhm.
enough the dinner tables and the conversations.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think with that caveat and an important statement, I would also contend that we've lost catechism. So
yeah.
while we need the relational around the table, come with me on trips, let's join a basketball league together. Like, yes and amen. We need more of that, more less structured, more relational. But I think there also has to be like some education formation that needs to take place somewhere, just to give like new believers categories by which they can hear, all the stuff that they're going to hear.
Yeah, doesn't the Didache say like they developed new believers for a year before they baptized them in the first century?
Well, I didn't know you were going to quiz me on the Didache, but I'm sure that's correct.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's right. Like the catechesis of new believers
that is
in the
right.
first century was extensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was reading J.T. English's book, Deep Discipleship, earlier today for something, and he's got some good categories on this matter of disciple making. And I was talking yesterday to a couple of friends who are writing a book on evangelism, and one of the sections is about discipling new believers, and just making a distinction. As a church planter, it's easy to just sort of take someone's model of disciple making without thinking in terms of you have different levels of people that need discipling. And so however you phrase it, however you structure it, you've got people that are deep and they're ready to do systematic theology studies. They could sign up for online seminary classes right now. And then you got people, Joe Schmo, who just became a Christian and he's still struggling with his former addictions, and he's got all of his pagan friends pulling at him. And like, that's a whole other animal, right?
Agreed. And this is why, again, I would argue for having a discipleship pathway as much as a culture, because when you put it on paper, here are the steps we want a pagan or unbeliever or a lost person to take step by step until they become like on mission for the gospel. You actually can equip the saints, Ephesians 4, to do the work of the ministry. And now in our church culture at Redemption City Church, we have gospel community or small group leaders who know our discipleship pathway. And the people in their small groups who are meeting in their homes every week, they're thinking through, how do I take this person to the next step of their development or discipleship? They're not a member. They're not committed to a local church. They need to do that. They're not baptized. They need to be baptized. They're a faithful but a member, but they're not serving. And so when you put it on paper and have a system along with the culture, it gives a framework or handrails for your people to join you in the discipleship process.
Yeah, that's good. How do you articulate those stages?
We have a document. We have Lost, that is the first stage. New disciples, the second stage. Mature disciples, the third. And leaders, the fourth. Multipliers, the fifth. And there's metrics and descriptions along each pathway. And then programs that help you progress from one stage to the next. And these are not new things we do. A lot of them are just reiterating biblical stuff like membership, being committed to a local church, or getting baptized, or making disciples. So we have a document that kind of summarizes it.
What did you have the pathway developed before you planted or years in?
A year or two in, because so much of what was happening discipleship-wise was organic, but once you grow past 100, you can only have relational connection with so many people. And your job as a pastor, again, is to equip the saints to multiply the discipleship happening in the church. And a lot of people don't have the relational or intellectual capacity you do as the lead planner. So you need to put clear guide marks and steps to help your people know how to lead someone from one stage to the next.
Mm-hmm.
So it was out of necessity we added it, because we found that we weren't making as many disciples as we would have liked once we reached a growth stage that we couldn't handle relationally that many people.
Mm-hmm. We touched on this a little bit, but I know you have a very diverse congregation. And as you think about discipling people of different backgrounds and different spiritual maturity levels, how do you think through this discipleship pathway with all of that diversity in mind?
Sure. So I'm American. I grew up in America. I'm half white, half Middle Eastern. So I have somewhat of an Eastern context, but also some Western. But I found, our church when it started did not have a super diverse leadership. And so I found because of that, we had discipleship gaps. We were great at teaching ecclesiology, missiology, Christology, great at developing the mind, the head, and the hands, not so great at developing the heart. And we want to develop all three, right? So I could teach someone supralapsarianism or eschatology, fill their mind. I could give them a role. Hey, you're over greeting, or you're going to help with sound, or you're going to be discipled by leading in this ministry of the church, right? Heart was missing. Head, hands, we were crushing. And it wasn't until we had a diversity of leadership, like a Ghanaian pastor on our team. And our other, pastors, 2 of them were white, and myself, were like, man, we don't pray like this guy. We don't fast as much as this guy. Yeah. And it's actually having diversity of leadership, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status at the leadership table actually helps you find out your gaps. That's why I think diversity is one of the most important things you can have to make mature, holistic disciples. So we've begun to focus on how do we develop the heart, like just as much as your mind and hands in the discipleship pathway.
That's good, man. That's really good. So as a leader, what role do you play? It's obviously an important role in modeling this discipleship pathway, and how do you do that?
First is actually what I saw you do. And, the scriptures say, be an example to the flock. You don't want to ask anyone to do anything that you're not already doing. And so I want to set the standard of generosity in the church. I want to set the standard of service in the church, standard of community, standard of holiness. So, just leading by example, which again, I saw you do, man, at Imago Dei for years. Like I saw you be generous when no one was looking. I saw you with your Bible open and praying when no one was looking. So it's caught as much as it is taught. Mm-hmm. And another thing that's huge in leadership is if we're going to expositorily preach through the scriptures, just teaching these steps in our discipleship pathway along the way as the Bible reveals them, right? So when we're going through Acts 2 and it says they have all things in common with one another, do you have all things in common with your Christian brothers and sisters? It's a great question to ask. Hey, here's a great way to do that. Go to RCC 101 and consider becoming a member. And what I'm doing is teaching the text, helping them apply the text, but plugging it into the pathway. And we even have strategic Sundays that are focused on parts of our pathway. We'll have Gospel Community Sunday. We'll have Mission Sunday. We'll have Membership Sunday. We'll have Vision Sunday. So I'm always preaching the text towards an action step along the pathway. And ideally, everyone is progressing along the way into maturity in Christ.
It's beautiful, man. Adam Mutasib, church planter in Baltimore, Maryland. Always a joy to talk to you, man. Sometimes I get lost in these conversations because I'm taking notes of things I want to do or talk about later. So I appreciate you coming on because I benefit from it, man. So yeah, thanks for your time.
I've learned 10 times more from you than you've learned from me. So thank you.
No, man, the teacher has become the student. That's what's happened here. And thank you for listening to the New Churches podcast. We'll see you next time, my friends. And remember, the tomb is empty and the throne is occupied. We are good news people in a bad news world. So let's go engage our communities with the gospel out of the overflow of a Christ-adoring heart.
You've been listening to the New Churches podcast, brought to you by Send Network. If you like what you heard, take a few minutes to rate and review us or share this episode with a friend. It's the best way to show your support. To find more reliable resources to start your new church well, visit newchurches.com.